Hello, this is Bruno Pelletier-Backer. And what you are watching today is the very first video in what will be a new series. I just figured I would start something new this summer. And I had the brilliant idea, at least I thought so, of starting a vlog. You know, those video blogs that everybody seems to be having nowadays. So here's my modest contribution. The format is most likely going to change as we go. Obviously, it will be about the guitar, it will be about jazz, it will be about improvisation, you know, all those good things. But I thought what I would start with today and probably the next few is some question and answers, because I seem to be getting a lot of the same questions. People email me, either potential students or people who have watched some of my other videos or read articles that I've posted on my website and whatnot. So it seems like some of the same questions come up. And there is a very common one, which is about reading music, reading and writing music. Basically, a lot of people are wondering if they need to learn to read music in order to become good guitarists or good, you know, jazz musicians for that matter. So it's well, let me give you the short answer first, and then I'll give you the long answer. So the short answer, yes, you should be learning to read music. And the long answer, so let me get started now. So the long answer involves actually several things. Because first of all, sometimes it's a little vague what we're trying to talk about when we talk about reading music. So let me explain the different components there. Reading music, and usually when people generally talk about reading music, they refer to what we call traditional notation or standard notation. All it is just a staff, you know, this system of 5 lines, and then you have little note heads that go up and down that staff and that basically tell you what the notes are. And it's a very logical system, actually. It kind of looks like a ladder, so the higher up the notes are, the higher the pitch, and the lower they are on the staff, the lower the pitch. You know, it seems quite logical. The advantages are that it's universal for all instruments, whether you play the tuba, the piano, the guitar, or the flute, or what have you, you will be using that traditional notation. Of course, percussion instruments, they have their own thing, but they're not considered, you know, fully you know, pitched instruments. So there's that. Reading, so learning to read that kind of notation is one particular skill. You simply learn to recognize the notes on the staff. The note that will be, say, on the very first line, the bottom line, that is, you will learn that it's an E. And every time you see that note head on that bottom line, you know that's an E, okay? And so forth. You know, there's other notes have their own location on the staff. So that's one thing. The other skill would be finding the names of the notes on your instrument. And it doesn't have anything to do with reading music. You know, all I'm talking about is, oh, if I play this note on the 3rd fret on, say, my big string, I'm playing a G. If I go down to the 2nd fret on that same string, I'm playing an F sharp, etc. So you see what I'm trying to tell you here. Those are 2 separate skills. Recognizing the notes on a piece of paper, that's an E, that's an F, that's an F sharp, that's an A, and so forth. Reading the music. And entirely separately from that is knowing what the names of the notes are on your fretboard. which I certainly would consider the most important skill. You know, if you're trying to become a serious musician, that's what you should be learning to do, probably before anything else. And the third skill would be what we call sight reading, which basically means putting skill number one and skill number two together. It basically means, oh, I'm looking at this piece of paper. It tells me there's, let's say, a D followed by an F followed by a G, and I know where those notes are on my instrument, and I can play them ideally in real time. I say ideally because that's probably like maybe a sub skill of skill number three, where if you want to have a career as a studio musician, even though apparently those things are kind of long gone by now, everybody records at home, you know, on their computer and so forth. You don't really have the studio musician as we used to know them, say 20, 30 years ago. Maybe not even that long ago, but you know, typically people would go in the studio to record well, all the music that you rock albums, pop albums, you know, anything that you would hear on the radio, TV shows, commercials, film scores, you know, all that kind of stuff that people would go to the studio. And of course, to have a successful career in a recording studio as a musician, you need to be able to read, and preferably quickly. You know, you don't need you know, time is money in the studio, and you cannot afford to make too many mistakes. You know, you'll have 2-3 takes and then that's about it. You know, you're not going to try something 20 times just because you keep on missing your part. Or if you play live in an orchestra, or you know, for theater, you know, there are still theater jobs going on. So if you want to have a career that way, then yes, you need to become a good sight reader. But that's you know, again, that's a separate skill. So what are the advantages of learning to read music? You know, if let's say I don't want to have a career in the studios, I just want to be a good musician. You know, I just want to learn about music. I want to learn about theory, and you know, learn to play better, etc., etc. So you need, number one, to be able to find the notes on your fretboard. Number two, identify those notes if they were on a piece of paper. And then number three, then merge those two things, but slowly. You know, you don't have to instantly play something at the right speed. And in fact, you could even argue that as long as you can find the notes and play the basic rhythm of what you're trying to play, you could eventually, you know, once you identified the notes, you could simply learn to play the thing at the tempo that it's meant to be played at. So that's my long answer. I would strongly recommend that anyone who's interested in learning more about music, learning more about theory, think about all the information that a guitar player is missing out on by not having access to the books that everybody else is looking at. You know, so people say, "Oh yeah, but you know, I have tabs. You know, I can read tabs. Tabs are fine. That's all I need." Well, I'm really going to disagree here, because tabs, yes, they're fine and they have their place. I'm not trying to be a snob about them. I don't use them. I never write tabs for any of my students. I entirely discourage them from using them. However, they have their place. You know, I used to play, for instance, a lot of fingerstyle. You know, like Travis picking, that sort of stuff, and Stefan Grossman. I used to learn a lot of those pieces, and it was all in tabs. And tabs were great for that. You know, they're for fingerstyle music. It's probably perfect, really. But anytime you have more than that, when you play chords, it astounds me when I see chords written in tab, and particularly if they're up the neck, like like you're okay, this note's on the 7th fret, this note on the 9th fret. Okay, what string is that? Okay, now this one goes up to the 6th. It's really hard to read. Diagrams, for that matter, are much easier to visualize, but tabs, when it comes to chords, they don't work well. And then also, as you all know, since you play the guitar, I assume you play the guitar if you're listening to my rants, you know that there are always several ways to play the same melody, the same phrase. Even if it's a 3-4 note little melody, there are all those different places where you can play that on the fretboard. So what are you going to do? Have 5 or 6 tabs for the same melody, and then you pick one. And this is even worse when it comes to transcriptions. All those published transcriptions that some of you are buying. Somebody transcribes, the say a solo by somebody, some prominent player. So somebody transcribes the solo, but usually someone else will prepare the tabs for that. And really, when you look at the tabs, you have no way of guaranteeing that that's exactly where the artist played his solo in the first place. Sometimes there's no way of knowing. And when it comes to other books, like if we're talking about methods or theory or exercise books, or let's say something talking about improvisation and talking about concepts. One thing that you may want to know is often enough, the person who wrote the book is not the person who does the tabs. Usually the writer will turn in their manuscript. Well, it's not handwritten, but their work in traditional notation, and then somebody on staff, at the publishers, their job will be to prepare the tabs for what they were given. And I'm not even including mistakes. I've seen every now and then, mistakes on the tabs. Like you look at the tabs, say that's not playable, or it wasn't, that's not where it was, or this doesn't make any sense, or whatever. Or, oh, duh, it's the right fret, but it's on the wrong string, etc. So if you were able to have direct access to the traditional notation, you would instantly know what works and what doesn't. And even if it takes longer, it's like this whole thing about becoming a better musician or a better guitar player, it's really a work of patience. You have to think in the long term. You're like, I know we always want something now. We want to be able to do this right now or tomorrow or as soon as possible. But think of it as a great investment. All the time you're going to spend trying to learn about music, I could even include theory, because if you know how to read music, then you have a better understanding of theory. You get to visualize a lot more interesting concepts if you know what the notes look like on the staff, more so than if you simply try to remember visually or anything else like that. But what I'm trying to say is just think of all the time you spend learning those skills as a great investment for the future, because there will be no limit. You take your time, as I like to say. This is something I've heard several other people mention before. It's really not about your goal or your destination. It's about the journey. You have to enjoy the journey. You have to know that it will take a long time to get wherever you're trying to get to, musically speaking, but you need to enjoy the journey. Take your time, be patient, and just have fun with it. One last thing, since I mentioned talking, I talked about time. Um, I've heard people say, "Oh, I only have so much time to work on my instrument, and I would rather not waste my time learning about reading the notes and theory and all that stuff. I would rather spend my time playing the instrument." Well, everybody's different. As I'm trying to say, whatever time you might be spending on this will be time well spent. That I can guarantee you, because um, your returns are going to be so much greater than the little time that you're investing in the first place, right? So don't think that way. And also, I can also guarantee you that if you keep pushing back, like, it's like, no, I don't need to read now, or maybe later, but I'm not ready for it now. I have other things that I need to learn on the guitar right now before I even bother learning to read. That's just not the right way, because you are going to hit a wall. That's guaranteed. You can only go so far. At some point, if you want to understand a little better what you're doing, you're going to have to look at, the music on paper. That's basically all I can say. All right, well, I think I'll stop my rant here. I think you get the point. If you have any questions, or if you disagree with me, feel free to write somewhere in the comments or contact me directly. If you have any specific questions that you're just curious to know what I could talk about, just feel free to contact me, and I'll do my best to address those concerns that you may have. Okay, so for now, this is it. This is then video one. So God, aren't you happy you got to watch the very, very first video of this series? That's hopefully that will be impressive. Okay, so have fun for now, and I will be in touch. I will continue this series, hopefully on a regular basis. All right, so stay tuned.